it was like the 10th pitch of 13 plus or something on the route, and you're just like, you know what, this is fine. Like this is terrible. Let's call it good. This is Climbing Gold. Katie, can you give us your basic bio?
Yeah, I was born in the deep South, Southeast Louisiana, and found climbing at the age of 16, when I went to work as a junior counselor at this camp in North Carolina. And it was kind of one of those things. I was like your typical sort of like disgruntled wayward teen. Like I was not resonating with anything. I wasn't interested in school. I was having a hard time at home. And I was sort of like sent to this camp to like get my shit together. Um, and on the tour of the campus, they like took us all around to all the things that you can help facilitate. And the very last thing was this wooden climbing wall in the back of the property there that was probably like 30 feet tall, and it had two like plastic routes going up it, and kids were belaying each other, and I had never really seen anything like it. And was like, what is this all about? And they're like, yeah, we do climbing. We practice here at the camp, and then we go out on these like backpacking trips to climbing around like North Carolina, Linville Gorge, Asheville area. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I totally fell in love that summer. But then, go back to Louisiana where there's no rocks anywhere. Basically was a Gumby climber for like the first 10 years of my climbing. Happened to like meet some other kids at high school that were into it, and we were just going out, and I had to lie to my parents about where I was going because I was going with these guys, and they wouldn't let me go on these like co-ed overnight trips. And so I always said I was spending the night at my friend Meredith's house for the weekend, and then we were driving like 7 to 8 hours to go like climbing in Alabama, on these like funny little sandstone cliffs and boulders. And it really wasn't until I left Louisiana at the age of 24 that I feel like I could stop being a Gumby and climbing. And the idea was always to come to Yosemite because, and that was the 90s. So everything was happening in California. Like if you were a climber in the US, California is where you needed to go. And I just had it in my mind that if I wanted to be considered a real climber, I needed to get out here. Um, and eventually I made it happen. But yeah, it's been 27 years that I've been climbing now, and I live here in Bishop, California with Ben. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
I always forget how people who have been climbing a long time always had just tremendous hurdles to getting into climbing. So like scratching up gear and getting started. And it's like, when we interview people nowadays, it's like, oh, I went to the gym, it was super fun, I got into it, and then I started rock climbing, and it was like all chill. I'm like, man, when you grew up in Louisiana 30 years ago, it's a lot harder to become a
It's
climber.
yeah, it's a thing. It becomes its own like task to figure out how you're gonna do it.
So
I
for
remember like back then too that I think it was John Sherman was like writing for Rock and Ice, and he went to every single state and like did a climb in every single state. And Louisiana was the only place where like there's just like I remember this photo of him like with his foot on a piece of rock, like kind of like how a pirate would stand, and that was like the best he could come up with in Louisiana, of being like I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah.
so what uh so what does style in climbing mean for you guys? I'm like, let's just dive into rock climbing style.
I mean, that's a broad question. It could be
Well, that's
so.
that's kind of the point. I mean, I'm curious where you want to take it because I mean, style and climbing is a huge topic, and I'm curious what that means to you. Like, what do you think of when you hear style and climbing?
I guess I think of a few different things. So one, like what's the best style that you could climb in as far as like ethics are concerned, or especially if we're talking about free climbing. Are you going ground up? Are you aiding? Are you wrapping in? What's the best that you can do with your ability at the time? And maybe it's not always in your mind like the best style, and you would like to do it better. And so you can always keep trying to do it better. And then it goes to like, oh, that route, that boulder is not my style. As in, like, I only climb slabs, or I only climb big things with big dinos, things that challenge people's kind of physical limits or their psyche, I guess, about what they feel they can and can't do or what they're interested in. And then third, it's like actual style. Like, what do you wear when you go climbing? What do you look like? how do you act out there? Yes, it's kind of broad. Which brings me to like my worst style being definitely an asterisk ascent of father time.
But let's hear about all the asterisks. We
So
gotta.
it
What?
was
Yeah, but
like,
we'll actually break down what's an like for those. What's an asterisk?
it's kind of like, like a note to look at the end of like the book, right? You're like, oh, a free ascent of father time with an asterisk on pitch 15. You're like, oh, what's that? And then you look and you're like, the asterisk is so something else, like maybe you top roped it or you didn't quite do it or whatever it is. So it's usually, like to call out James Lucas, his ascent of free rider was an asterisk ascent because he didn't lower all the way down one pitch. He just went from a rest of one pitch to the top.
Come on, Katie. We're supposed to be talking about your bad style.
So then I don't want to give away my asterisks just yet without like the full story, but father time's something that I tried numerous times from the ground, hauling every time, and then would run out of time before I was able to like send all the pitches. And it was like 3 times of doing that. Because I mean, I'm not, I sort of classify myself as a blue collar climber. Like I have to work quite hard for things. And I also work quite a bit. So I only have X amount of time very often. So then it would be like 8 days on the wall. I didn't send. Now I have to repel. I won't come back till next season. So after 3 times of that, I'm like, fuck, I have to change my approach to this. So I'm going to fix lines leading from the ground and I'm going to leave them here and I'm going to come mini track on them until I can figure this out and then try and come from the ground and red point everything. So Ben and I did that going from the ground. We spent 10 days on the wall, except for the boulder problem pitch. I had red pointed the season before, like successfully. Ben belayed me on it. And on this 10-day ascent of father time, I had sent everything on lead, but I still hadn't finished this boulder problem pitch this go. And I must have tried it 12 times. It was kind of warm for me. It was end of June. I didn't send it that go. And I was like, we can't stay up here. Like we have to go down. So my ascent of father time is that, yes, I've red pointed every single pitch on there, except when we did our 10-day push, I did not red point that one pitch. And that's my asterisk, which is like,
Yeah, that's a big asterisk.
that's for sure like the worst style I've ever done anything in.
But so are you still content with that though? Where you, in
Yeah,
your
I'm
heart, you
just
feel
like,
like
you
you're
know
done with
what?
father
Like
time and you're like,
I'm
that's good
done
enough.
with it. That's good enough. Like I'm pretty happy because the goal was sure it's be really sick to do the whole route at once, but I really just wanted to climb those pitches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I would say when I was thinking about personal worst style, mine is very similar to that. It was like doing a first ascent with Tommy on all cap that has sort of asterisks where, like basically the two of us did one of the last pitches from a stance in the middle where we like climbed half the pitch, fell off, and then just went from a no hands to the, like from the middle of the pitch to the top. Because we were sort of like, well, we plan to be on the wall 3 days. It's already been 4. Tommy's about to miss his family's Halloween celebration, and he's going to be getting divorced if we don't get off the wall. And we're sort of like, oh, like, well, we'll just call it good with half a pitch instead of. But the thing for me is that I was kind of like, well, the whole ascent had left room for improvement in style anyway. So I was kind of like, we didn't do this perfectly, but realistically, someone down the road will do this all better anyway. Because like, we team freed, we each top roped half the pitches. The aspiration would be for somebody to do it in a day. And so I was kind of like, oh, this isn't perfect anyway. So I'm not too stressed that our ascent isn't ideal. I was kind of like, either way, we established this new climb that anybody else can now go do themselves in better style. So I'm like, that's fine. I feel like for establishing a first ascent, you're like, to me, that's good enough. Though obviously, other people have different standards for that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it for sure always comes down to like time, ability, and then yeah, like, do you have to go? Do you have the time? Do you have the psych to keep coming back up here?
Yeah, it's like in our case, it's second to last pitch on the wall. It's a 13D slab, and you're kind of like, can we just be done and go down? It's like my fingers hurt. I'm over it. It was like the 10th pitch, a 13 plus or something on the route, and you're just like, you know what? This is fine. Like this is terrible. Let's call it good.